back, good people, to Flânuers. Um, Good to see you guys again, as always. So this week, it's been a topic again that's I think we've all kind of had certain types of conversations around, and it's been especially post COVID, which was a fun worldwide fun, which was a learning moment, a teachable moment for all of us. Obviously, it was a quite at a certain human cost, but through that experiment that we were all sort of forced into, we learned quite a bit. We experimented around, working on site, working remotely. Certain peoples have completely, drastically, and organizations even have drastically changed their whole model in terms of value creation. Um, Certain truths, I think, have been or convictions have been dispelled through that. I know that here, for example, in France, there's a fair segment of the population who, for them, it's unnegotiable that I don't have a set number of remote working days, and I'd say that's the same. I think in a lot of places, I think the UK probably push it even a buck further in experimenting with the 4 day week would look like, work week. And so the part obviously, and so there's a segment of the population who strongly believes in that, right, in terms of remote working. And there's another segment which says, you know, but there's a certain ingredient that we miss through having everybody on site in the office, right? So there's examples with Nike and a host of other organizations. I think Twitter, Elon Musk had a whole thing about that in terms of bringing people back to the office as a sort of
Quite
recreating the
controversially
social
with
aspect which
Twitter.
we're missing. Yeah, what were we saying?
I said quite controversially when Elon
Quite
Musk did it
right,
because
quite
of how he
controversial.
did it, especially. Yeah.
Definitely, yeah, definitely. I think we there's a few things we could say about that,
Yeah.
but essentially, yeah. So, how do we find? I guess the question for us, or the thing I want us to sort of discuss and kind of flatten A on today was, how do we have this? We need both, right? I think there's no hard truth on one extreme or the other, and so what does the hybrid model look like? I think different people, different organizations have experimented around that, and so wanted to see, what our collective thoughts were on that, as far as like, this sort of blended space where you have both, co-location, people in the office, socially creating the connections they need to solve problems, et cetera. And then the remote aspect, which actually gives people flexibility. And some people feel like they do their best work at home, have peace of mind, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not kicking it to anybody. Anybody can just grab the mic and
I'm
go.
I'm gonna kick it to Dan because
All right, I'll take.
yeah, no, I'm gonna, because, and I'll tell you why. Because so we were a bit active on LinkedIn this week, weren't we? And it was the thing about, so what I saw on LinkedIn was, I think, because Dan responded to something, joined in a conversation, and obviously I saw Dan's comments and so on. But it was this post, I think, by CNBC, which talked about John Donahoe, Nike CEO, and that was big news, saying something. I think it's something like bringing people back to work for 3 days. And then so a lot of people did speak up about that. And there was a big thing, I think, in our community where people say, no, you should just let people work from where they want. And Dan, you were the first person I saw. I saw that because you joined into that conversation, and I wondered whether you wanted to say what you.
Yeah. So it's one of these things. It's interesting to me. Sometimes I like playing the contrarian, and this is one of those. For whatever reason, I think it's because my view was changed because I was having a conversation with a CEO who I'm still not going to name, but a CEO of a very respected development shop, like author of books that people look up to for how they treat employees. And he said, we've got people who we are doing return to the office, and we've had people come to us and say, hey, I work better remotely because it allows me to do whatever the personal things are, and I'm more productive. I don't have to come in the office. You get more out of me. And he said, yeah, I don't doubt that, but we're not optimizing for you. We're optimizing for the team. Now now, that struck me, and I'm like, gosh, that sounds like things that we preach when we talk about agile development and product development, and we talk about not optimizing for the parts and optimizing for the whole. Like, this sounds like, well, that sounds like systems thinking. Like, we want to optimize for the team. That's right. I don't want to optimize for the person. I want to optimize for the team. And I very much believe that humans, that even as nice as this is, that I can see your two lovely faces and we can have these conversations remotely in 3 different countries, it would be so much better and richer if the 3 of us were actually sitting in front of the Flânuers Cafe chatting together, because of that in-person rapport. And I believe that teams are better. I'm not saying you can't do it. Obviously, COVID taught us we can do it. I think we're better in person together. So I believe that. Now, that doesn't make my belief right, but I find that there are so many people who come at it from just so viscerally of, oh, well, someone's suggesting that you come back to the office. Like, that's awful and evil and draconian, and you should do everything remote. And I've got training classes about how to do it remote. And we figured out how to do it remote, and remote's just as good. Well, but what if it isn't? Like, what if somebody wants to experiment with, maybe we do something back in the office, or, we have a hybrid thing. My personal, again, going back to the CEO conversation, the fact that this is what I personally like doesn't mean that I think it works for everybody, but I prefer being treated like an adult, which is to say, there are times when I can work from home. Why go to the office and sit on Zoom calls all day? That's silly. Like, that's a waste of my time. But maybe there's a day or 2 or 3 when I go in because everyone's going to be in and we're going to do stuff together. Great. And then other days I sit at home and I do my work. Like, just trust me to be there when I need to be there and be at home when I can be at home. And I'll balance that. Right. That's my take. Just treat people like adults.
Yeah. So, so that seems like quite a balanced take. So treat people like adults, let them self-govern and decide amongst themselves. But I suppose, I mean, like you said, like, people are quite visceral. People are are quite black and white about it often. Maybe are they? I think just we see a very strong response, don't we, when people call it into question. I wondered whether either of you were up for saying which you prefer, or just put it out there. Actually, I don't prefer any.
I think I said how I prefer. I like the flexibility of, there are days when I want to be at home, and there are days I much prefer working. If I'm going to work on a team and we're going to work on something together, I would much rather be together in a room.
Yeah.
I mean,
How do
for
you feel,
me,
Sanjeev?
I think this is so devoid of a lot of debates that are often had. Like, context is queen. Context matters.
Yeah.
Because if I'm looking at just me from my job, as I do as a coach, change agent, whatever you want to call it, right? Somebody who helps people connect and see different perspectives, experiment, all these different things. My job is impossible. And I didn't enjoy it during that period when I had to do it remotely, because I couldn't have informal conversations. I couldn't create the type of spaces where people naturally would come to me to discuss something, or I would informally go to a group of people to propose something, which is, the heart of our job is those informal conversations, right? And then we, sometimes there's a very opportunistic side to our job where we can create an impromptu meeting, right? And then that's where sometimes the magic happens, bring people together, et cetera. So for my context, I would much rather be in the office, right? And are there days, yeah, when I would like to have the flexibility to be at home and have that, flexibility from a family standpoint, or just being in a different city? Yes. But I think if you're a developer, right, you'd probably, or whatever you're working on, let's say you're an architecture guy or whatever, depending on your role, I think there's a balance which may feel more or less comfortable, and based on your personality as well, right? So I think sometimes we forget that context matters. If you're working for a pharmaceutical company, like that, you're going to have a different probably take than somebody working for Nike, who's part of an innovation team that needs to, drop mood boards all day and figure out, do a lot of research and use the research, trade all these thoughts, see what sticks, create that sort of collective intelligence. So I think sometimes it's not black and white. It can't be black and white. It has to, it has to depend on whatever that context is. That's really how I feel about it. And that can change even from on a, like we never have the same set of people we interact with, right, over a set period of time. Those things
Yeah.
evolve, right? When you're in a team, you're going to probably interact with that same group of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people sometimes over a certain, 5, 6, 7, 8 months, whatever duration of the project or service thing you're working on, and that may change. So, you know, I think that bit of context is precious to understand, and then design
I
around it.
think I feel the same as what you just said there. I think I personally, I'm sort of left feeling like I feel like I'm grieving the loss of the office-based team.
Hmm.
And it is very selfish, and I understand it's a very selfish position to take. But personally, I'm mourning it. And like you said, Sanju, like there's a lot of the things that I do, a lot of the work that I do is cultural. It's trying to encourage people to behave differently, but behave differently. It's a what we coach is a team sport. So I'm not trying to get them to behave differently necessarily just as an individual. Trying to get people to behave differently around one another, interacting with one. And they're not around one another. They're around one another insofar as I can see all their faces on the screen a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But they're not actually in the room with one another.
Yeah.
And it's like, I feel a bit horrible even saying this because of that visceral response that you get when you see these things on the internet, and people are like, "You shouldn't take this off us," and I don't think it should be taken away from people. But it does make me feel like, and also I sort of want to say, like, it's not necessarily. I don't think it's necessarily me having a moan about, no, I've got to work harder now. Because I do think I have to work harder, but the work's changed. It's completely changed. It's a completely different type of. So, for like as an example, and I'm not really thinking of a real life example, but I'm just thinking of like in generalizations. Like you were saying earlier, if I found by speaking with individuals or teams that there was some sort of politically powerful person that was making decisions abstract or disparately away from teams that was affecting teams. When I was in the office, I'd go, right, how can I doorstep that person? How can I go past them in the corridor? I'd be like a private investigator waiting, the what do you call it, like Columbo or something. Do you call it that footpad or something like that? Whatever you call it, like waiting around for them and like trying to get into that conversation and seeing how they, or I frozen, seeing how they would react to me on a one-to-one and try and build that relationship with them and have that conversation. And generally because people are nice, despite what the impact of those decisions that they were making, generally people are nice and they want to be nice with you. So if you go into that nice, then you can have that conversation with them. You can try and spark up that relationship. When you're mostly remote, it's just a greater degree or potential just to be ignored. I can't wait for them around a corner or see them in the food court or see them at the coffee station, the water cooler moments. I can try and get into their calendar. And they are they're the gatekeepers of their calendar, or their EA, their executive assistant, the gatekeepers of their calendar. It's like, no, I want to talk to you. I don't need to
I'm
talk
going
to
through
you.
that right now, man. It's painful. Trust me.
You know what I mean? And so you can eventually still do it, but it's just like, whoa. And then the other thing I think like is an expectation on people like us to like, we might be agility coaches. So what we do is we bring pace and stuff like that to delivery. And our work just got a lot slower. People see the impact. It takes a lot longer for people to take the impacts.
Yep.
And yeah, it's just really difficult to reconcile that's something that we've lost. The genie's out of the bottle. I think I don't
Yeah.
For sure.
can't put them back
But I
in.
want to touch on, Matt, you said you thought it was selfish. I don't think it is selfish. And, when you talk about the, that a lot of the work that we do tends to be kind of cultural, et cetera. I think that the problem that people struggle with in their companies is it is people. It is people and interactions. I mean, right back to the manifesto. That is the problem. And it's how we interact with each other. And there was this great article, which I can't think of offhand what it was titled, but it was basically talking about how, at least in the United States, that the amount of people who hang out, like actually get together and hang out, that is dropping precipitously. Like people don't just go and hang out in person. It doesn't happen anymore. And so we're losing
The
that
office
social
or
skill outside, just in life.
outside? Yeah,
Like the
gotcha.
people
Gotcha.
that have friends that
Yeah.
go hang out and do stuff in
Yep.
person is dropping precipitously.
Yep.
And there's some book that someone recommended off a comment I made on this article about, I actually posted something on my LinkedIn about it, and somebody said, "Oh, you should read this book called Bowling Alone." So I don't know if it's the same topic, but I was told it might be. Essentially, that people aren't doing that, and so we're losing that ability to socially relate. And I believe that we need the in person. I believe that when we put it all digital and we go into a metaverse, and we're talking to each other like this, there's a certain amount of humanity that we take out of it, and we don't see it anymore. And so I don't see that to me, I don't find that as a selfish position. I find that a position of, hey, I want us all to embrace our humanity and be humans and be the very best that we can. And to me, that means being together in real commune, right? A real communion of being together and sharing the experience in person, I think is very important to people. And I can't cite the studies, but I am sure I have read stuff where people without contact, without physical human contact, like it is detrimental to your health.
Mhm.
And so I find that being in person is, and it just limiting it to who's at home and then meeting people at work virtually, I don't think is good for you as a human. Like take away sometimes we do things like Agile, and we talk about we're going to do this because it gives us a better result. So when I first wanted to do Agile at the company where I was in product, the developer said, "Oh, but like kind of all this stuff that you want to do. And if we just did everything all on the one screen at once, we would touch it one time and it would be one set of testing. Yeah, it would be big batch and we wouldn't get the whole end to end, but it would be better and cheaper and more efficient." Well, maybe we're not going for efficient. Maybe we're going for what's the better result, and building in increments, even though we may touch the same screen 20 times where we would have done it one time in waterfall, we get to a better end result. So same thing here. Maybe being together is not as efficient for some people, or maybe even the team, but it produces a better outcome, both in terms of what we produce and in how we relate as humans. And sorry, I'm passionate about it, so I've said a lot. I'm gonna be
No, I
quite late.
think
Somebody else chime in.
for a lot of companies, right? There's the real question around this, and I've seen a lot of, having had the opportunity to work with some HR people and things like that, especially in times of transformation context. One of the premium questions that comes up is cost, right?
Yeah.
What's the cost of, multiple factors? What's the cost of me now renting out this space where I'm expecting, 5,000, 10,000 employees to somehow find a way to maximize the amount of space being used so I can maximize what I'm paying per month for this thing, which is incidentally tied to an image I want to have because I'm on, if you're in New York on Park Avenue, if you're in France, Champs-Elysees, or whatever swanky neighborhood, right, that costs you a certain amount of X dollars. So I think sometimes, um, and then what is the cost of that experience that I want to create, which some of the smart organizations are thinking about now. It's like, instead of building the conversation around how I force people to come back, it's like, what is the experience I need to create? I need to create for people to feel like it's worth it for me to go to the office because I'm getting something that I'm not going to get at home, or I'm getting something that I can't get anywhere else, right? Which is more than just meeting people around the coffee, right? So And, you know, you touched on that earlier, or I think in another episode, we're talking about how you know, people having the flexibility to bring their kids to work. And, you know, obviously the GAFA, you know, were instrumental in creating all these spaces that people visited from all over the world. You know, think about Starbucks, the Amazons, where, you know, you had your foosball, you had your you know, beyond ping pong. So you had a whole experiment where everything you needed was there, so you don't have to go home, which is another extreme of unhealthy, not going home. But yeah, so cost, you know, balance, giving people flexibility, and focusing on the type of experiences that you want to create for people to not feel like they're being coerced to come to work or stay at home, etc., or choose, right? And then giving people independence and flexibility to, depending on their context, again, figure out what's best, and you know, having measurables that show that, okay, this balance is less healthy, this balance is more healthy. And I think also we always make this premise of hybrid versus physical, co-located versus, you know, remote. There's an X factor there, which is there's very few organizations which have the same group of people working together, like true teams. You rarely
Yes.
have true teams. A lot of teams are doing multi projects, multi products. So you have several hosts of interactions that you have with your boss, with your close teams, with your sort of chapter or the group of people that you have the same skill sets with. So that all of that, I think, does matter. And I think, you know, like you said, Matt, you walking by that, you know, that leader who's making decisions that are indirectly impacting the team that you're trying to help, you know, the cost of you trying to get that meeting or just even kickstarting that conversation, right? There's a bigger risk there of you sending that team's conversation and not being, you know, being blown off, and then you're feeling some type of way, he's feeling some type of way, and then that just puts a whole dent in that whole dynamic that you would have naturally created, right? So I think,
But
again,
definitely, but I'm not. There's a thing there though, because that's probably one of the things that makes me feel like it's selfish. Because there's another aspect to this that I wanted to throw back over to the parent of the, like, actually it feels like, you know, it feels like this experiment of that maybe the pandemic put us into, of working outside of an office, working from home. It feels like it's been very successful. You know, it hasn't really put any dents into profits. And then maybe like the Nike thing, is, you know, actually they're associating this situation, or conflating it with, they may just be going off the boil. You know, there may be some other reason. Why can't people who are geographically disparate, with all of the tools, online tools that they've got, still be innovative? Maybe if they funded research and development differently, maybe if they sold off some of these offices, you know, or stopped paying rent on some of the offices and channeled those funds into behind people working from wherever they want, into being innovative. I sort of feel like actually it's, you know, it's a personal feeling about mourning the fact that I don't get to doorstep that executive nowadays, and I have to find harder ways of getting through to them.
Yeah.
But if the people who are getting the work done, if the people who are creating the code, if the people who are building the services, if the people who are interacting with the customer are not saying, you got to let us back in the office, then maybe it is working. You know, and they seem even that, I don't know. I mean, it feels like they seem to be saying that, because as well. And I would also go back to one of the things that Dan said, is that maybe they're saying that maybe they don't want to get back to the office because actually they found you know, there's a lot to be said about them finding that freedom. I mean, I know, Dan, you brought up humans aren't interacting as much as they used to, but maybe that's not about working from home or return to the office. Maybe working from home is a way of saying to them, look, you've got that more freedom, that more, like you said earlier, you're treated more like adults, more like humans. and you can spend that time that you've got out of the office in whatever ways you want, and you'll choose to or not choose to set up interactions with people that are not office people. You know, it might be like a more sort of a forced situation where you say you'll interact with people, but it's the people who work here that we choose to work here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know,
Well, but
you
those are
have
the
to be grateful for those interactions. It's like, well, no, what other interactions? What do you think
but
about
those are the people you're working with, and I think that's part of, you know, when I think about where you run into issues is right. Matt, I know that you and I philosophically don't agree on everything, but we talk to each other, right?
Yeah.
I find that you have at least in the United States, you've got tons of people who you're just in echo chambers. And so if I could choose who I'm going to hang out with, I'm going to choose the people who are like me, who think like me, who get along with me and think like I do. But there's no challenge in that. And at work, I have to work with people who don't agree with me. And so if I allow you, oh, just go pick and choose who you work with, I'm gonna, like, not me personally, but like there are people who are gonna go out there and say, well, working with these people is easier because they're more like me. And when we talk about bringing diversity and diversity of thought, you need to bring people together who disagree. And so I think there is value in forcing people who don't agree together in a room and saying, we need to figure out how to work with one another. And so even though you might not choose to hang out with these people socially, and you may disagree with each other, you need to work with each other to get this done. And forcing it to happen in person creates much better connection, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a
Yeah.
good point.
Yeah.
And so making sure that people do come together in an office. I suppose then one of the other things is this. So the night, getting back to the night thing again, is this, it's I think it was a 3-day thing. And I didn't read any deeper into it. I don't know whether that's you choose your own 3 days, but I don't see how that could work either. It's like you'd probably have to put some constraint or structure around the fact that, like, well, if we want you in to work together, then it's got to be the same 3 days, hasn't it?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, and that's when you start getting into really yucky and really too many parameters, right? And
Yeah.
tell me if you guys feel wrong about this analogy. I think a lot of with the advent of online shopping, online buying, right, online attention, there's been obviously a new balance that's been need to be had around how do I get people to balance coming into the store and reliving the experience of the store that I'm able to provide versus just creating an online experience where I know, right, okay, it's a different type of cost, but my end game is still providing a seamless experience for them to buy whatever product, service, or good that they would have bought in store or online, right? And so that's been
I
it,
I even
right?
see there we've lost so much with that online shopping. I mean, think about I miss and I find that I've lost if I am doing work outside in my yard and I have a question about something. There used to be a time when I could go to a hardware store and I would find someone that knew what the heck they were talking about and they could help me. These days they don't, because they're competing with the online retailers who they don't have any of that expertise and you're just buying. So you're not actually getting that service of people who understand what they're talking about. And look at Amazon. You know how much time I spend? Like, I'm like, I need a thing. There's so many fake, just like knockoff products from China. I mean, honestly, is mostly they're coming from China. There's these knockoff products and they've got all these fake reviews. I have to do so much work to filter through what is the actual thing and the thing that's not going to break on me 10 seconds after I buy it. I used to be able to go to a store and I could trust that I was going to buy a thing and the people who were selling it were knowledgeable and they could help me out. I don't have that anymore. So I agree. We've made it easy to shop online, but I'm losing some of the things that we had as humans when we interacted and had conversations, right?
But that's you just said the key word right there. It's like trust. We often talk about time to market, time to value, time to trust. So me going on in your store and trusting what I'm buying because I'm physically seeing proof and living proof of through the interactions with the sales assistant, the guy who's helping me pick my product, the relationships I create there. the heritage that you're able to show me through whatever storytelling and imagery that's in the physical store versus what I can create online, which is a virtual world. And the same thing for teams, right? It's that time to trust through the environment in which we sit and joke and get to know each other, even those who I don't necessarily know, but I know that every time I walk past you in the hallway, you give me a nod, even though we're not, we don't work in the same department, but you give me a nod and I feel good about that. Or you check on me or whatever, right? Or you give me a wink or a smile. And those sort of informal, non-visible cues that are part of our language, right? That I think that's the part that sometimes is really, people can't quite put a cost on that, right? And balance that with the cost of the brick and mortar place I want you to come shop, or the brick and mortar where I want you as my employees to come and fill in. So like, I think one thing I particularly am a little bit, hate the word anal, but like really like not non-negotiable, but I really try to encourage people remotely, at least, like, we're humans. We're based off of corporal language, and so like turning your camera on. Like if we were to have this conversation without that camera on, like, you know what I mean? Like, so I think those are one of the learnings that I think all agree that we can amplify, is like, at least turn your camera on, so at least you can recreate at least some of that you're missing, that you wouldn't have, right? Physically.
Yeah, I
I
agree
think you
with
can
that.
absolutely have better remote, right? And which I don't know that makes it the best situation, but anyway, that's it. Matt, you were going to say.
Well, I'm going to do my minute. We're pretty much at the end.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm going to do my minute sign off. And I think I'm just going to reiterate. I think I just go back to, like, I do feel, I mourn the passing of all those office interactions. I think going back into an office, it's never going to be the same. I'm never going to get that thing that I enjoyed out of it back. It'll always be slightly different. Because I do go back into offices now. We all go back into offices now, and they're half as many people hot desking in different places. So it's not the same. It's not the same. I am enjoying doing things like training online. There are real positives. I'm enjoying having the flexibility in my own life. I do love all that. I am as worried as anyone else, and so I probably would be one of those people with a visceral reaction to someone at the top says this has got to change. It's like, I'm sure there's a better way of convincing, like Dan, you were saying earlier, Sanjira, you were saying, convincing people that going back into the office is a good thing. If we all go there on 3, 2, 1 day or whatever a week, and we're all there, there's got to be a better way of selling that. And I think that's right now is what's missing, because that takes the agency away from people if you don't do that, and it takes the humanity away from it. And when they do that, when they find out to do that, I'll be right there at the front of the queue, welcoming everyone back, getting stuff done, and then going away for another 4 days. So that's my take, I think.
You want to go? You want me to go, Dan, or
Yeah, sure. So I think when people, these visceral reactions to taking it away is like, people have become accustomed to, I can go, for a month and go to Paris, and I can work and check in. And so I have this freedom, the digital nomad thing. I can go wherever. And that's great for you as an individual, but is that really optimizing for the team? And, I think that companies have to evaluate what is and when I say evaluate, I mean evaluate in a way that they're doing it with some amount of dispassion of, like, how do these teams operate in the best way? And I think that we all sacrifice a little bit of what's good for us when we come together to do what's good for the whole. I think that's part of it, is we all give up some of that, right? We give up on what we think is the best idea because someone else has an idea that we think we want to try. So there are trade-offs. And so I think that being at it from a place of, but it's worse for me. I think that's actually the selfish thing of saying, yeah, but for me, it's worse to be not, I like being remote, and therefore everybody else should be remote. Well, I think there's a give and take. So I think there's trade-offs, and I think different industries will have different best situations, because there are some things, frankly, you can't do remote. You can't go change without a robot. go change pipes that are broken in the street because it froze in Texas in, once in a blue moon, because you work for the water company. You can't do that remotely. You have to go out and dig the thing. And so there are some jobs that require that you be in person. I think there are some white collar office jobs that are better in person as well. And I think it's to each company to figure out what that is.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's maybe cliche, but sense and purpose. I think the companies that don't spend a lot of time arguing about this are the ones who organically or naturally have done a good job of really constantly reminding people of the sense and purpose of why you're here to begin with all these other people in this greater adventure enterprise, right? Whether you're working in a government or startup or whatever. And the teams or organizations or groups of people who do that really well, like they just find a way to figure it out and they align around something because that bigger sense and purpose is there, and that's the driver. And then we'll find whatever way it's best for us to achieve that sense and purpose. So I think investing in that is quintessential. I also think that, and that's my last bit, the irrefutable truth is that we're never going to go back to what was. So there's going to be a mix or a balance that we're going to have to find depending on our context or the situation we're dealing with, from a work or whatever perspective. And I think, like you said, if that's the irrefutable truth, we're never going back to one way or another. Like we have to get better at doing the things that we're uncomfortable doing right now, which is like having, meetings remotely or in a hybrid way where you have some people physically, let's say us three physically together and our other three teammates are remotely located. That's a challenge in itself. So turning your cameras on, how do you use better visual management to engage everybody, right? So people know I'm a big fan of some of the visual management, whether it's Miro or Mural or whatever. So I think doing those things better create a better experience for, whether you're remote or hybrid or whatever. And that ultimately helps move this whole experimentation around this new world that we live in is, much more seamless. So those are my final thoughts. And that was really fun. That was a fun topic. I enjoyed that. I think won't be the last of it. So see you guys next time around quickly. Can't wait to do the next one.
Thanks for joining us today on Flânuers, available wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you heard, you know what to do.